Okay, so the topic of home education has quickly become one of my favorite things to talk about. We talked about it in a previous episode, and I said that I genuinely believe that if we want to save the country, we have to keep our kids home. We have to be the ones to educate them. And that's a hard pill to swallow. I completely understand that because I was not always in this camp. I did advocate for public school. I thought, in part it was just what I was told. This is what you do. And I didn't think that I had the ability to homeschool, the knowledge to homeschool. I thought I'd set my kids up for failure. But I'm learning as I go. It's so interesting. I'm out of school, but I'm still learning. And it seems everything I have ever been told from the school system is a lie. And here today to join the podcast episode is somebody who really dives into this for a living. This is her career, her passion. She advocates for home education and the emancipation from the school system, which is such an interesting way to put it. Sam Sorbo is today's guest. And Sam is an education freedom advocate. Her mission is to help parents and their children emancipate from our modern school system. A successful Hollywood film actress, writer, and producer, Sam stepped back from her own career to immerse herself in the home education of her 3 young children for over a decade. Recognizing the brokenness of our institutional system led Sam to understand there is much more to education than academics. She is a prolific author, podcast, and radio host, international speaker, and mentor. Sam teaches parents how home learning can be easier than they imagine and more rewarding than their wildest dreams, which is so crazy because this is like the epiphany and mind-blowing thing that I have been realizing lately is home education is easier than I ever thought it would be. It's not to say that there are not hard days, but it's easier than I thought it would be. It is not sitting at a desk 8 hours a day and me having to fill that time. And it is more rewarding for our family than my absolute wildest dream. So I love that she actually has that line in her bio. Without further ado, we're going to jump right into this episode because I love it. I think you guys are going to love it too. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining the show today. I'm really excited to talk to you about home education, as you call it, because you don't like the word homeschool. I'd love if you could kind of dive into that, how you differentiate homeschool to home education or home learning, which is kind of where you have taken you kind of want to take the movement.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's unfortunate because people think of homeschool as public school in the home setting. And unfortunately, if you do that, you're sort of missing the entire point. The point being that the reason that you're not sending your child to school is not because there's one bad teacher or there's one bad textbook, or there's one sort of inappropriate ideology. It's because the entire system is so perverted at this point that you can't stand it. And so if that's the case, then why would you emulate anything that they do in the school, really? And that's my sort of launch point for what I call home education, which is the upbringing of the child, which we by and large as a culture have abandoned because school takes up so much of the day, and parents have now gotten into the habit of basically they drop their kids off to learn everything that they need, supposedly, and so then they don't bother with a lot of what growing up and the education of a child should be from the parents. The parents sort of abdicate that because they think, well, the school's handling it now. So I've given my child over to the school. They're in charge of educating my child. And therefore, I don't really need to weigh in so much. And that's resulted in a lot of rebellion in teenagers, for instance, a lot of misbehavior because young children get confused over really who's the authority figure here. Because mom and dad tell me that the school's the authority figure, but when the school contradicts mom and dad are like, no, don't believe the school, believe us. And so that just sort of opens the door for this aggravation of the relationship, let's say. And so when you approach home education from the viewpoint that your job is to shepherd the child into adulthood, Now, some of that looks like academic education, sure, but a lot of it looks like showing the child how to keep books, how to balance a checkbook, for instance. Maybe show the child how you went about negotiating the lease on your new car. That's a valuable tool to give a child, and that's not something that the child will ever learn in a school classroom. How to negotiate, when you're buying a new house or when you're trying to close on a mortgage with a bank. What kind of mortgage? Are you going to get the ARM? Or are you going to get the fixed rate? And what does that mean? What's that look like? Those are all life skills that parents typically might abdicate because they think, well, the child's learning everything the child needs in school. And now, of course, the stuff that the child's learning in school, the schools, what they're covering today, there's a lot of gender ideology, there's DEI in the schools, there's CRT, there's all of this sort of nefarious ideology that children really shouldn't even be exposed to, much less be given be given by an authority figure as truth, because it's lies. And so they're really left with a conundrum. I hope that started to answer your question. I tend to go
No,
on
totally.
about this stuff. It's a little
Yeah.
complicated. It's hard to sort of sort through it all.
Right. So school essentially is like this 8 hour a day thing. You sit down, you shut up, you be quiet, you do what you're told. You respond the way that you're told. You don't ask questions outside of the realm of what the teacher's comfortable with answering. And if you do, you probably aren't going to get an answer. A lot of teachers don't know everything about everything, but that's kind of the beauty of home education as opposed to homeschool, is like we have the ability, if there's a question outside of the realm of what might be right here in the textbook, we can go dive into that. Whereas in school, there's no time for that. You're rushing it because you have to fit everything in with 30 some odd kids, and 8 hours seems like a lot of time, but it's really not when you have that many kids that you're trying to focus on. So there's this difference of, you don't want your kids sitting at a desk for 8 hours, not being able to talk, not being able to move. Sure, you might have recess, but you don't have, it's just,
Yeah.
it's so different, and
Well, it's
I'm,
training, right? It's training in obedience. It's training in, it's actually, I mean, if you really go to the fundamentals, school is the opposite of education, because education should be the quest for knowledge, which begins with a question, right? That's how we quest for things. We start with a question and then we go in search of answers for the question, in search of knowledge. But the first thing that you learn to do in school is sit down and shut up. And don't ask questions. You need permission first. You've got to raise your hand in order to ask a question. That's really anti-education. It's the opposite. Then the other things that you learn, you learn don't question, don't ask, right? Don't try because failure's bad. That's another lesson that we learned in school that's anti-education. Don't try, it's very stifling, but failure's bad. So that's really just converts to don't try anything, because if you fail, that's the worst thing that can happen to you. Don't read because the teacher read the book. She'll tell you what's in it. She'll tell you what she wants to hear back from you, right? So it sort of comes down to don't read. And then don't think, because the teacher will tell you what to think, and you just tell her your thoughts according to what she dictated, and you can skate through. You get the A's, and so you're trained to perform a script, which is not the same as performing in real life.
No, that's completely accurate. And I love hearing you talk about it. I've watched some podcasts that you've been on, and you're such a fierce advocate for this movement as a whole, which I think is amazing, because you don't back down to the point that you even say when it comes to the word indoctrination. And, we have parents on the right who are saying, don't indoctrinate my kids when we're sending them to school with this leftist ideology, or CRT, or DEI, or, the LGBTQIA, XYZ, plus, 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 all of those things. When you use the word indoctrination, you say, no, we're actually supposed to indoctrinate our kids. So explain that to us so we can really have this whole mind shift with you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's sort of crucial to grasp, is the idea of the education of the child is to give the child truth. Well, truth is doctrine. So in a sense, that is the indoctrination of the child, the inputting of the doctrine into the child. But the doctrine has to be truthful. And so what we're seeing in the schools today is they have false doctrine. They say that a boy can become a woman, that a girl can grow up to be a man. That's what they say. Well, that's a lie. So that's why we say, hey, don't indoctrinate my child with your lies. But on the flip side, well, the child needs some doctrine. They need some worldview. And so absent your worldview, and they're not getting your worldview if they're exposed to that worldview every day for 8 hours a day, your child will adopt the worldview that they are exposed to. So, and by the way, children adopt worldview like that. They think they're being given truth. Children love truth. And so the flip side is also true. If you give your child the truth, the true truth, they will love it and they will pursue it. And so this is something it took me over a decade to figure out. It's not something that we were exposed to in school. Everything that we think about education is what we were taught in school. But look at them now. And you think that you weren't indoctrinated because when you went to school, you learned math and you learned history. Maybe think again, because what history did you learn? How much do you really know about the founding of this nation? And how much did you learn in school versus maybe after school, right? So I just read an extensive biography of Benjamin Franklin. He was, people don't know this. He was a rock star. He was bigger than Mick Jagger. He was bigger than Michael Jackson. He was bigger than Elvis. This is a time before they had recordings, and he was bigger than those people. He was world renowned. And I suppose I probably shouldn't say he was bigger than Elvis. Elvis had the highest name recognition in the world. And of course, the world was somewhat smaller then. But when you compound it with the lack of the transfer of knowledge and information back then, I mean, it's really astounding what he did. And the reason that I bring him up is he was entirely self-taught. He never went to school. But he's the only person in the world that has signed all 4 of our founding documents. The Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, sure. But he also signed and negotiated the peace treaty with England because we had been at war with England, right? And of course, we weren't really taught that there was a peace treaty with England in school. We were taught there was a war, we won, end of story. No, we negotiated peace with England, and we also negotiated with France that France wouldn't enter the war on the side of the British. And that's something that Benjamin Franklin did after he was a printer and a published author, a best-selling author, and an inventor and a scientific researcher, and, right? And so when you look at that and you go, this is our heritage, and we were deprived knowledge of it because, there's not enough time to teach them all of that. We'd rather teach them some stuff about, I don't know, how the Indians were the most peaceful people in the world, and Columbus came and he was a savage, which is not true. We have all of our history now from Howard Zinn, who was an avowed communist. So I don't know what you're hoping that we will gain from that. Instead, we should be teaching the true history of the United States of America and making children proud to be Americans. Because without the pride in this nation, the nation's going to fall.
So I have to be embarrassingly vulnerable right now. I knew almost none of that about Benjamin Franklin, and which is unsurprising because.
No, do you think that Benjamin Franklin was a deist?
I don't know.
Okay. Kids are taught today pretty much he was a deist, meaning he didn't really believe in God. He was a deist for about 15 minutes when he was 15 years old. And then he disavowed that and he believed in God. In fact, during the Continental Congress, he said to everybody, hey, there's so much acrimony in the room. We should all get on our knees and pray to God to resolve this.
See, so I don't know these things, and that's embarrassing for me. And I am homeschooling now. My youngest to 7 and now 5. My 7-year-old will be 8 here soon. So I'm going to be relearning all of this stuff, or hopefully learning it for the first time, because twofold, my memory is terrible, but also I don't think I ever learned any of this in school. I don't remember ever focusing on this, and you don't have the time because you have to cram so much in. That's all half empty when you're learning it. It's not.
Here's the thing. I didn't learn it either. I learned it I actually learned it after I finished homeschooling my kids because I thought, I want to read a biography of Benjamin Franklin. I think I found it in a used bookstore, and I'm like, this looks interesting. I want to know about him. And so that's why I know. I mean, here's the thing. You can't learn everything at one go anyway. But
Right.
what's really wonderful is as you raise your children and you expose them to good history, and I highly recommend Wall Builders for that because they tell the history of the United States from the point of view of the people who lived it. And all the people
Mm.
who have recorded, well, I don't know if it's all, but most of the people who recorded the battles and the various events would what's the word I'm looking for? Definitely give credit to an almighty God for the wondrous happenings and miracles that happened during the account that they're giving you. There were so many miracles in the founding of this nation. And we forget God's role in the founding of this nation at our own peril. So learning it would be a really great thing. And what happens is you show the kids that this nation is very special because it was a Christian nation. That's why. There's only one reason that the United States of America is the greatest nation in the world. And nobody can argue with me that it's the greatest nation in the world because it produced the greatest advancement in prosperity the world over, okay? Not just for us, for everyone. We have benefited the entire world. Why? Because the engine of creativity was not harnessed in this nation in the sense that it wasn't limited by a tyrannical power saying, no, you must do this for me and you must do that for me. The founding of this nation provided freedom. And it provided, and this is key, they have patent laws. So it provided intellectual property rights. So you could advance just based on your thoughts, your ideas, your novel ideas. And there are other nations in the world that don't have that have vast resources like Brazil. Brazil is still a poor country because they don't have the laws protecting the individual citizens. And then when you protect the individual citizen and his or her ideas, then that citizen is motivated to go and bring his ideas out into the world and everybody can benefit. But when you don't protect them, they're not motivated. So there's nothing to harness. You can't hitch your wagon to that. So when you show children the greatness of this nation and its roots in Christian biblical principles, then they embrace it, and then they know they have something to fight for, and they will fight for it.
Yeah. Well, you say that, learning doesn't stop. And that's a very true statement. We learn as adults as well. We don't learn everything when we're younger, but I feel like with Benjamin Franklin, I should know these things, and it's kind of embarrassing that I don't. And it's a testament to the gaps in my education when it comes to public school, and how I was taught.
They don't teach history well. They teach it very
Right,
poorly. They make
right.
it dry and boring just so that you won't like it. See, the education system, the school system in the United States has been so corrupted by, I would say, by nefarious forces. And maybe some people in the mix are trying to do well and they think that it was a good idea. Maybe at the time they thought it was a good idea to switch to whole word reading, for instance, which was a complete debacle and a disaster. And it was implemented without even testing it. And they've been doing this experiment on school children over decades. For many decades, they've been doing different experiments on school children, maybe knowing that they would fail, maybe not knowing that they would fail, but it was a way to sell books. And it's all about the money. And unfortunately, to get to sort of the crux of the matter, our schools are all about money. And in fact, they raise children now to be all about money so that children graduate thinking, I just have to get the best job for the most amount of money, and then I'll be happy. And that's what our schools teach. They teach that the ultimate value of an individual is the amount of money that he can earn. And it's a lie. And so really we should be abandoning the schools for that alone, because I don't want my children to think that their highest value is earning money. I want them to think their highest value is service to others, is relationship, is loving, right? When you recalibrate what you want for your children, not Harvard necessarily, not the very best school that I can get them into so that they can get a high-paying job and never call me on Sunday, right? That's not my goal. Well, then what is my goal? And then what's the best way to go about that goal? And is calculus really necessary to achieve that goal?
Yeah. No, completely true. Somebody actually asked me recently, when it comes to calculus, are you going to be able to teach your child that, or are you going to have to hire a tutor out for it? I'm like, well, I never learned calculus in school, and I have survived. So, I mean,
but let me say this. And I'm a math person. I tutored calculus. I absolutely love math, and it hurts me. It hurts me to hear somebody say they don't like math, right? It's painful to me. But I finally gave up that ghost because not everybody loves math. I finally had to admit, not everybody can love math. That's not their forte. Just like I can't love drawing because it just doesn't interest me.
right.
So then you say, well, then well, what if your boy's a math whiz? How is he going to learn math? Well, you know what? You're going to teach him how to read. And he'll read the textbook. And he'll be able to read the lesson and teach himself math, because all the answers are in the textbooks.
Well, it's not to say that we can't then learn it as well to be able to help them. Just because we didn't learn it in school or we don't know it doesn't mean I can't now learn it and then help my child.
That's true too. But you have to admit, most people would just be like, oh, I'm not going to learn calculus. If my son needs to learn calculus, I'm going to find him a teacher. Well, guess what? He doesn't need a teacher, because when you start with home education, what happens is the responsibility for teaching actually transfers to the child. Slowly, gradually, but eventually the child realizes he's his own best teacher. And that's true for everybody. It's just that we never learned it in school. But everybody really teaches themselves. They might find a teacher from whom they can teach themselves, but ultimately you are your own teacher. And so when you show a child, hey, here's the textbook. I mean, I remember my son came to me with logic, and I'd never studied logic, but I was teaching him logic, so-called. He was learning logic under my supervision, and he came to me, he said, Mom, I can't figure this problem out. It was the third problem of the chapter. And I said, well, did you read the chapter? Because that's the first question. And he goes, pretty much. And I said, no. We go back and we read the chapter. So we started reading the chapter. And, as of the fourth sentence, he goes, oh, no, I get it now. And he wanted to turn back to the problem set and start doing the problem set. And I said, no, you read the whole chapter, then you do the problem set. And that's the test of whether you really understood the chapter or not. So you first read the whole chapter, because that's where the learning comes. Mm-hmm. Then when you do the problem set, it's really just to jog your memory to make sure that you learned it. And once I showed him that, then he was off to the races. And he basically never asked me, I mean, maybe a couple times on a different subject, but he basically never came back to me and said, teach me this now, because he understood, oh, the answers are in the book. The teaching is in the book. All I have to do is read the book.
Yeah. Well, I'd also argue that not everybody even needs calculus. I don't
exactly.
In my line of work. So could I learn it? Sure. But am I going to use it in my everyday life? No. Basic math. Yeah. Like algebra, I'm probably going to use a little bit, and very little of that, to be completely honest with what I do. I'm in podcasting and I work in the pro-life movement and, homeschool my kids. So at some point I'm going to need math in the sense of just to be able to look over my kids' work and whatnot. But otherwise, I don't use that. So unless my children are going into a career where they need it, they don't necessarily need to learn it either. And I think that's part of the beauty of homeschooling, is that you can cater it toward what they're interested in and what their own interests are, and you dive into that. You don't have to teach all this extra stuff that they may or may not need if they have a brain that's geared toward, STEM or engineering or that kind of thing, or they want to be a mathematician or something along those lines, then sure, go ahead. But
Right.
to me, I'm not automatically just going to go, yep, calculus, trigonometry, these are the things we're going to learn. What if they want to be a zookeeper?
No, that's exactly
probably not
correct.
going to need it.
And what's great about the home education environment is if they want to be a zookeeper, you can facilitate that, and they can start at age 12 or whatever, volunteering at an animal shelter or what have you. And when you do that, if they might decide, oh, I thought I wanted to be an animal keeper, but I really I can't stand cleaning up throw up or whatever, right? So that's not what I want to do. Maybe I want to go into research instead or something. And they can sort of rule things out earlier, and they can tailor their experience one way or another, and you can help that. You facilitate that. So you're not the teacher, because if your child wants to be a zoologist, you're not a zoologist, but you can tailor their experience to help them on their way. And that's really the beauty of the home education paradigm, but it's not school at home. That's the key. It's learning all day long. It's a different paradigm.
Totally. Which is what we do every day anyway. There's hardly a day goes by that I don't learn something new just by nature of living life. We're always learning. Let's rewind a little bit, because you did have your kids in school at some point, and then you switched to homeschooling. What was it that made you make that switch?
So this is way back before Common Core. And we moved actually so that we would be in a better school district. And my son went through first and second grade. And there were just a number of issues that I had with the way things were run. And I slowly realized that their focus really wasn't academic. It was behavior. It was, the one thing that I cite really, there are two major things. One, he turned in a book report in second grade every month. And as of the fifth book report, I asked the teacher how his book reports were. And mind you, I was like the guilty parent. I helped out in the classroom. I taught art in the classroom. I graded papers. I helped her clean up after school many times a week. I was there. I was present. So 5 months, 6 months into school, and I asked her how were his book reports, because I've never gotten one back graded. I never got it back. So there was no feedback. So I asked her, and quick as a wink, she says, oh, not very good. And I was like, what? You're kidding, right? She goes, oh, no, not very good at all. And I'm like, really? It takes for me to ask? I'm here all the time. You had every opportunity to clue me in. Hey, your kid's not up to par or whatever. And then I asked her, hey, show me a good book report. So she did. Now, in hindsight, I'm sure that it was a parent who had written out that book report. It was beautiful cursive. It was fully filled in. It was impeccable. But she gave me that as the metric, and I just felt so convicted. And then a little bit later, we went away for 3 weeks, and she gave, because the deal is, if you do work while you're gone and you arrange it with the school, as long as you bring work back, they'll give you work and you bring it back done, then they still collect the money for the child. So I'm a team player. They want to collect the money for my child. He is enrolled in school. So I'm going to, abide by all the rules. My goodness, I'm a rules keeper, right? And so they gave me work to do, and I put it in front of him, and he goes, oh, mommy, we don't have to do this. Teacher says we don't have to do this. And I'm like, well, she gave it to me to give to you to do. He's like, but when I'm in school, we don't have to do this. She says we don't have to. So she'd given me the busy work that she didn't require. So then I'm the substitute teacher, thank you very much, giving him the work that he otherwise wouldn't have to do. And once I looked at it, it was super, super dumb. It was just stupid. And so that ticked me off, because it was like a setup to, and I've said this, the school comes between the parent and the child. It cannot help but do that. It does that. So if you're a parent and you want to preserve your relationship with your child, do not send your child away from you to another authority. Just don't. Certainly not every day for several hours a day. Certainly not.
I was
But
just going to
basically,
ask if you consider the school system kind of the culprit for the breakdown of the American family.
oh yeah, absolutely. I lay that right at the foot of the school door. Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, without a doubt. I don't know where else to put it. That's number one. There might be some other, the what is it? The not the New Deal, the welfare, the implementation of welfare by LBJ is largely responsible for the breakdown of the Black family, but certainly the schools for the family in general throughout the culture. Yeah, absolutely.
how so?
Because the school comes between the child and the parent. It can't help but do so. The child sees a secondary authority that the parent has virtually put above them. So the parent says to the child tacitly, when dropping the child off at school, I don't know, I can't teach you, but the school knows better than I do. They have all the knowledge. They will teach you everything that you need to know. That's the tacit message that goes out to the child. And then the school says, for instance, for example, the teacher says, "Oh, we have a field trip on Friday, so make sure you get mommy to sign this paper, and bring it back. Mommy has to sign this, okay?" And so the child goes home and says, "Mommy, you have to sign this. Teacher says you have to sign this. Sign it." And so mommy says, "Oh, okay, give it to me. I'll sign it." Boop! You just went under the authority of the teacher. You did what the teacher demanded right in front of the child. So now your authority is meaningless, basically, because the teacher has the authority. You just gave it to her. And so you can get away with dictating to the child for a little bit longer, but the moment that you contradict what the child hears in school, you're at a disadvantage. Now, it might not be like a complete erosion right away, but over time, your authority is eroded. And that's why we have rebellious teenagers. I raised 3 teenagers, they never rebelled.
Yeah, I have never looked at it that way, but really, when you drop them off, you are saying, I can't teach
I
you.
can't.
These people are the authority. You go to them for your education. You go to them for what's right, what's wrong, how we should be taught, what you should
Right.
know. And it's kind of crazy. I'm like thinking of it because I talk, being in the pro-life movement as well, I talk a lot about how Planned Parenthood tries to become the sexpert in your child's life to then make them sexually active and, all of these things. But then when it comes to this, I'm thinking like, it's the exact same thing. The education system is wanting to become the education expert, or the school system is wanting to become the education expert in your child's life so that they go to them for all
Right.
of their knowledge. They go to,
Right.
or college, university even, for all of their knowledge. Parents don't know anything and don't even have the ability to learn it. It's kind of just the same line of thinking of we're giving our children to these people
Yeah.
and we
you
don't
don't
even
have to
realize it.
You don't have to take my word for it. The proof is in the pudding. Look what's coming out of the colleges now. I can't tell you the number of parents who come up to me and say, because, I speak around the country and stuff, I wish I'd heard you earlier. I lost my boy. He won't talk to me anymore because he thinks that I'm an evil Republican or whatever it might be. My child is trans. My child is, gay or whatever, and won't talk to me anymore. And I hear it all the time. And it's because they ceded their authority at the outset. And that's something, I guess I'm too much of a control freak. I'm like, no, not doing that. But no, I mean, look, I gave up on the schools because there was just too much that bothered me that was not academic. And I'm an academic, and I sent my children to school to learn academically. And they weren't learning academics. When the school did not tell me, when the teacher didn't give me feedback so that I could improve my son's book reports before I asked, that was a betrayal.
Yeah.
When the teacher gave my son busy work that she otherwise would not have given him, but gave to him so that I would be the bad guy, that's a betrayal. But there were many other instances like, oh, we need more parents to chaperone our trip to the zoo. And so I volunteered with another parent and we joined forces and we brought our younger kids with the kids from the class, and we took an extra kid from the class so that would alleviate some of the pressure because they didn't think that they had enough chaperones. And then lo and behold, we're at the zoo, we're walking around the zoo, and all 4 teachers are on a holiday with no kids because all the parents stepped up to shepherd the kids around the zoo. And that's considered school. You know what I'm saying? So we're paying the teachers to have a nice day at the zoo without any kids. And I just went, there's just something wrong with this. This is not the teachers. The teachers aren't concerned with the education of the children. And by the way, let's fast forward to COVID. So during COVID, I was on the air and I was shepherding parents into homeschooling as best I could, offering them resources and stuff. And somebody sent me a video from a school in Virginia. It was a grade school, and it was like this sweet video. The principal came did a video and then put in a bunch of videos from all the other teachers. Every teacher did a little video for the students. Hey kids, be safe. Make sure you wash your hands. Today I'm taking my dog for a walk, but remember to put your mask on. Blah, blah, blah. Not a single teacher. Don't forget to study your sight words. Don't forget to study your spelling words. Don't forget to finish reading the book that we started. Don't forget to drill some math facts while you're home during COVID. Not a single line from any of those teachers about the academic improvement of those children. And that was a good school. So they are not interested in the academic achievement of your child. And that's how we define education. Wrongly, but that's how we define it. So if we're playing by their terms and they're telling us that education is academics, we need to hold them to that. And they are not stepping up to the plate. Not anymore. But they haven't been there for a very long time because it's been 20 years, almost, 15 years since my oldest was in school. So you gotta think, okay, what do I want for my child? Is school the best option? And I will tell you, under no circumstances is school the best option. It's like super, super simple. Then you have to figure out, okay, so then what am I gonna do? And there are plenty of options of how to engage in the education of your child. But don't think that your child is one of these one-size-fits-all children that the school thinks they are, because they're not. Your child is unique. Your child is a gift, and your job is to open that gift and find out what's inside, not tell it what it is, not dictate to it what it is. So
I think COVID is when my eyes kind of got opened a lot more. I think a lot of parents is when they had their eyes open. My son was in 6th grade at the time, I think, and the teachers
Sixth
were doing
grade?
my son. Oh, so I have a 16-year-old as well.
Okay. I didn't hear that. I heard a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old.
Yeah, so I'm homeschooling them. My son
Right.
is at a private school. We recently moved to Alabama, and a lot of people, and maybe I can even touch on that just very briefly here, because I have a lot of people ask me, like, why is he in private school and why are you homeschooling your kids? I actually wish I was homeschooling him. Realistically, I do. But we decided on private school. We moved from Colorado to Alabama, knew no one. We're in a smaller area. I think as my girls get older, the high school community for homeschool will be a lot bigger because we're seeing masses go toward the homeschooling community. I think for him, not knowing anybody at all in Alabama, having not grown up here, and we just moved here, everybody touts the socialization aspect. I don't agree with that. I agree that he could be socialized elsewhere, but he does play
Is he an extrovert?
Oh, yes. He does play football, and that's part of it, going to the school to be able to play football. Sure. And he, him being 15 years old, he's a lot more, I do wish I knew all of this sooner. I do wish I homeschooled him from a very young age. I have a lot of regrets with that. But so he's at a private school locally, and I'm not stupid or not naive to the fact that there are outside influences in schools. There are peers who may not be amazing influences. There are teachers who are not always amazing influences. So I even struggle with the fact that he's not a homeschool child, but we did choose that for the time being. And, but my younger two are homeschooled. But with that,
But here's the thing, like it's perfectly understandable. He's been in school, he's accustomed to it. Why rock the boat, especially when you move? Maybe try to keep things as even keeled as possible for a while. But he's 16. What does he want to do? Is school really the best sort of opportunity that he might have to do the thing that he wants to do? Because if he wants to be a pilot, he could do
right.
homeschool and start his pilot license and get his pilot license in a year, for instance. Whereas school, because there's so much time in school and it's wasted time, it tends to be a distraction, especially as the child matures. It tends to be more of a distraction from maybe the thing that might be most exciting to him. And so you have an opportunity. He's 16. He's 16 now, or he's still 15?
16.
So maybe he wants to get a job and save up so that he can buy himself a car or whatever. And maybe school isn't the best option for him. There's also the possibility, because a lot of private schools are going hybrid, so you could maybe hybridize his program. Or maybe he just really, really wants the social opportunities that school presents, and he really enjoys spending his days that way. And I understand that when a child is accustomed to one thing, that's it. They're accustomed to it. They don't want to rock the boat. But there are plenty of children, just for your viewers, there are plenty of children who are in school because they were never given the opportunity. And lots of them would take the opportunity in a heartbeat to not have to go to school, to not have to get up early every morning. Teenagers need sleep. And typically they go to bed late because that's their circadian rhythm. As a teen, with the hormones and stuff, the teenager tends to go to sleep late and need to sleep in. But we don't let them sleep in because they got to get up for swim meet or whatever, practice, or or school, for instance. So don't, just because you made a choice a year ago, don't think that that's just necessarily the choice moving forward for the rest of his high school career. And then for the other two, you're off to the races, and you're not going to settle necessarily on one thing and go, okay, this is it for the rest of my time with my kids, because you don't know your children. You only know them this age, but when they get to be 9, they're different again because they change a lot. And so you just have to keep that flexibility, that idea that, well, maybe we'll try this for a while and maybe we'll try that for a while.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And in the school issue is something that I struggle with. I do co-parent, so I do have to make with my son's father. So there are some
Right, there are
decisions
other
that
mitigating, yeah.
I don't
Sure.
get to have fully on my own. Also, his dream is to play football. And he is a very good football player. And I'm fully on the train of football may not be where you go because, I think it's 7% of athletes play in college, 1% play in the NFL. And then aside from
There's
that,
so many other careers in football.
oh yeah, absolutely. Coaching. We've
So
actually
it's sort
talked
of
about
like,
that.
if that's
Training,
his,
coaching.
right. And so if that's his focus, then maybe this is the best track for him. Although, in the school, he is being exposed to things that you have no control over. But again,
Yes.
you're co-parenting, so you don't really have control anyway. So you're in a
Which
tight spot.
is a bigger advertisement for the biblical design for marriage and why we should do things the right way, why we get married, and then we have children. And of course, there are outliers with situations where a divorce may be necessary, maybe somebody's abusive or something along those lines. But, I tell people, hey, I am a walking billboard for why you should do things biblically, why you get married first,
Well,
why
thank you for your service.
I
But you know
didn't
what?
say, I
The
didn't
one
mean for it
piece
to
of
be that
advice,
way, but here we
right.
are. And
No, it wasn't intentional. The
right.
one piece of advice, if I may, is have the difficult conversations with your son.
Yeah, we do.
Broach the topics that are uncomfortable because he needs to know that you're there to talk to. And he's going to have issues come up. And so you want to open that door, and you want to open it often. And it's not easy to do, but you just make the time. You pick him up from school, you say, you drive to a parking spot You park the car, you say, listen, I just want to have a quick chat with you. I'm wondering if you're, struggling with anything that other kids are showing you on social media. And then you just zip it and you wait. And you just say, because if there's anything that you need to ask me, anything that you're curious about, I'm sitting right here. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's no judgment here. I understand that the kids in school have interests that may not align with our values, but if you have any questions, you need to know. You can always come to me, and you just keep opening that door and keep opening that door. That's one thing that I did with my kids. I would always go upstairs, and I homeschooled, but it wasn't like we were immune.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and in fact, my son was bullied, and it was a big deal. And it took me a long time to figure it out, much to my chagrin, much to my embarrassment later on when I finally figured it out and handled it. But I used to go up to my kids' rooms, I still do, and I just sit. And it might take 20 minutes before they start to just download their day or whatever. It might take some time. You can't just sit there and go, okay, well, I guess nothing, so let's just go. You can sit in silence for a while and not say anything and just allow that moment, because that time together that's portioned off by you, because you're the adult, right? If you portion off that time and you say, just want to sit here with you for a little bit and catch up and find out what's going on in your life. And I think it's so important. It's so important for teenagers, especially teenagers who are in school.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that goes for even homeschool students, because, just because you homeschool, I think you can have a protective barrier around them a little bit more. But for instance,
I tell you, I have several examples of things that got through the barrier.
yeah,
And I didn't know, because your kids won't tell you stuff. They'll tell each other. I have more than one kid, so they told each other, and then I found out after the fact. And I regret it, and there's nothing I can do about it. So it's not like, oh, I homeschooled and everything was perfect. But I know that I dodged a lot of bullets, and then there were some that got through, and there was, they were what they were. Luckily, my kids are strong enough to have figured stuff out.
right.
But yeah.
Yeah, homeschooling is not an excuse to not be vigilant. We have to be vigilant at all times when it comes to our children. So there was something that was interesting. I watched a interview that you did with, I think his name is Patrick Bet-David, and Destiny, which I couldn't get
Yeah,
past.
that was a debate.
Yeah, yes. Much more of a debate. But there was this interesting conversation that was going on, and it was regarding homeschooling. And Destiny said, or somebody's asking you, the pros versus the cons of homeschooling. And Destiny chimes in with, I can tell you what the cons are. And some of I kind of want to go over a couple of these, because we hear this all the time, just in general as homeschool families. One of the cons was, it says, Destiny said that homeschooling, a parent has to be in the house and can't work, which, two things, right? I mean, that's a good thing to have mom home with your kids, or in some instances, it is dad who homeschools. I do think mom is more of the nurturer, so that's what we see most often. But also, there are people who work and homeschool. There are people who sacrifice in a lot of ways and figure out ways to make it work, even if they are a working parent. So I don't feel like that was completely honest to the conversation. I mean, maybe their perspective of not really understanding the homeschool community and the lengths that parents will go to actually be able to homeschool their kids and what sacrifices they make.
Well, so he's a liberal, so he
Right.
doesn't really operate from a position of logic. He's much more emotional. And for instance, he believes that every sacrifice is a loss, but I believe that every sacrifice is a gain. The culture tells us that sacrifice is losing. When you sacrifice something, you are only giving up. But because I'm Christian, I know that sacrifice is the gaining of. So Christ sacrificed his life for mankind, which net gain,
Right.
at least for me, I know,
Yeah.
right? And so when people say, well, you sacrificed so much, I say, no, I gained so much that you call sacrifice. But to me, it was a net gain. So for Destiny, he says, well, the parent has to stay home. You rightly pointed out. Actually, that's a good thing. Why is it a good thing? Because the relationship that the parent has with the child is strengthened and enhanced. Not just strengthened, enhanced. It's a better relationship. And that brings much more into the parent's life and into the child's life than otherwise they'd have it. But his point of view is, oh my gosh, I couldn't stand my parents. Why? Because he went to school. So
Right.
he thinks that he couldn't stand his parents because that's what school taught him. And so his whole viewpoint is skewed against homeschooling because of his school experience. And frankly, that's pervasive throughout the culture. That's why so many people are like, homeschool? No, because of their experience in school. And it's too bad because the school experience has tarnished everything. Tarnished our relationship with our parents, tarnished the family, tarnished our experience with learning.
Yeah.
So we hate learning, with reading. So we hate reading as a culture. You know what I mean? Like Benjamin Franklin didn't have social media. He spent his time doing scientific research for fun. Who does that today?
Yeah.
And yet, if you designed a scientific experiment and did some cool research, you could actually develop a new something and change the world. But who does it today? We don't, because we're all distracted by social media and entertainment and all the stuff that the school basically, because they made learning so awful, shoved us in the direction of just entertain yourselves, make money and entertain yourselves, be good consumers. That's what we're taught to do in school. And so, the debate with Destiny is it was interesting because he didn't. Actually, I had people reach out and go, chalk one up, that was a win. And the reason that he didn't win is because he doesn't have any grounds for the claims that he makes. Mm-hmm. So all parents have to stay home with kids if they homeschool. That's not true. I know many parents who worked full-time while they were homeschooling. If your kids are younger, yeah, you need some childcare, sure. But schooling children, or rather educating children when they're younger, is like an hour a day. Can you afford an hour a day with your kid and then work full time? Absolutely. Why wouldn't you be able to do that?
Totally.
Or you might not be able to go to lunch with the girls. You might have to sacrifice, right? You let go of something in order to gain this other thing that's worth so much more. It's true that might be the case. But in his case, towards the end of the debate, he started trolling me. And it was interesting because we had a whole conversation about trolls and trolling at the beginning of the podcast. At the end, he started trolling me, mimicking me, saying the things that I say. Oh, so sacrifice is always a net gain. Yeah, it is. And I finally looked at him and I go, are you trolling me by saying the stuff that I say? Because you're literally making my points for me now. And he was.
Yeah.
He was trying to laugh at them, but at the same time, he literally was putting my point of view out there, stating it very well.
Yeah. Well, to affirm that, there were a couple other things that he said I'll go over really quickly because I hear it often. One of the other cons that he said was you have to go out of your way for extracurricular activities, which, I mean, very rarely have I ever seen, and I've now lived in 3 states in my life, and so that doesn't mean it's conducive of the entire United States, but I've never seen elementary school with like teams. Maybe some after like school, like
yes, good point. No, it's
like,
all sort of just the extracurricular outside the school.
It's
so
a
you're
youth.
going to have to go outside anyway. Yeah,
Right.
we did that
If
actually.
your kids play soccer, they're playing rec sports. If they play, or some sort of a
That's
youth
right.
league. And a lot of states in Colorado,
T-ball.
we didn't have, there were certain sports we didn't even have in middle school. It was only when you got to high school. And now there's the ability to do sports in high school. Private schools, I think that may be a little bit different. Like they're kind of their own little entity. But when it comes to public schooling, I know here in Alabama, and I know it was the same in Colorado, you can play for your local school if you want to get involved in high school sports at that level. But to me, that was something silly. You have to go out of your way to find it. Well, I mean, when you put your kid in gymnastics in elementary school, you're going out of your way to find it outside of school,
Yeah.
if they're playing tennis. So that was silly. And then there was another one that it was hard to find support opposed to the infrastructure of school. And I'm like, the support at the school, they keep everything secret from you anyway. What are you talking about? I mean, they don't
There's
tell
that,
you.
but also, yeah, because you really want to be dependent on governments.
Exactly.
Good luck with that.
And then he dives into special education. And if you're not ready for full-time care, you'll have to go to a speech pathologist outside of school, which
Don't even talk to me about special ed because, look, there's some great people in special ed and they do work for the system sometimes. But there are some terrible people in special ed.
Absolutely.
There are no guarantees in special ed.
Absolutely. And I would argue that, like parents need to know how to, if their child has special needs, like parents need to know this stuff. It's not something to say, well, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to teach my child. I'm going to hand them off to somebody else. I think that parents need to be able to learn that stuff and know it on their own. And yes, I do advocate for more resources, but they're out there. I mean, he just doesn't know that they're out there, but he did end up like kind of coming back and making a point, because one of the next things he says, and I don't even know if he realized it, was he starts talking about an article. I don't know if somebody else brought it up and said, how they were having massive bullying issues in school. And Andrew Tate, these kids were listening to Andrew Tate. And so these 11-year-olds were calling girls fat and totally bullying them. And then he goes on to say that pretty much like you're not going to go to school and not learn unnecessary things that are totally provocative. Pornography kids are exposed to, bullying kids are exposed to, eating disorders kids are exposed to. And I'm like sitting there thinking, do you even realize you are making the case for homeschool while defending or home education? I need to trying to call it what you call it, but you're making the case for us by saying all of these terrible things are happening at school and kids are being exposed to all of these terrible things, but then saying that home education is bad because mom's in the house. Like what?
Yeah, exactly. He's sort of all over, all across the board. He's very slippery. So when we first started, and I noticed this because he said something about school, blah blah blah, and I said that's not true about school, and he said, oh, so there weren't any schools, not even colleges. And I said, you said school, you didn't mean college or university. We were talking about school. And he said, oh, okay, I guess we have to define our terms now. So school is just grade school. And I'm like, yeah, because that's what you meant.
Yeah.
So he wanted to sort of weasel out of it and indicate, no, I meant university, because he was caught in a lie or being wrong. Mm-hmm. I think he just thought, I think he was just wrong. I don't think he was purposely lying, but he wanted to make the case that school back in the founders' day was very different, or was very much the same as school today. Well, there was no school back in the founders' day. There were no grade schools. There was one-room schoolhouses, which is not at all the same thing. That we don't look at that and say that's school. And there were barely that.
And it certainly
So
wasn't 8
Benjamin
hours
Franklin
a day.
never set foot in a school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And most of our founders never went to school. I don't know, because there were 56 of them. I don't know to a person. But basically, school was studying the Bible, learning how to read, knowing some things about numbers. That's it. That's what school was. And then if you studied up and you learned Latin and Greek, you might be able to get into Harvard at the age of 12.
Wow.
To study divinity. That was school back then. So, yeah.
That's very interesting. And the whole conversation was interesting to listen to, because for him, the metric of if somebody is educated or not is how well they do on standardized testing, which we know is obviously very silly. And it was even more ironic that Patrick Bet-David later said in the conversation that he scored like an 880 on his SAT or something along those lines. And his success is, I consider him probably a pretty smart man, and his success is pretty established beyond what we see with the everyday person. And I'm like, here you have this man who's arguing that, you need to have a high SAT score to be considered educated and smart or successful if they're going to be successful. And then you have somebody who scored poorly on the SATs and is extremely.
I think that's ultimately that's the main point
Exactly.
Is the school system tells you that academics are the only way to succeed in life. And money is the only metric for success. And those are two lies. And we know this. We know that academics aren't necessarily the only way to succeed in life. The reason that Patrick Bet-David is so successful is he knows how to sell. Mm-hmm. And he devises good ways of selling. And so he made a fortune, and then he figured out how to parlay that fortune into other success, which is not necessarily academics. It's people skills. Mm-hmm. But there is no test to measure people skills except experience. and he passed that test, except that it didn't exist. It's just, experience.
Right.
So, we really ought to be rethinking, especially now that schools have gone so far off the rails. We need to rethink the way that we look at education.
Absolutely. I just found it interesting because with all of the debating within it, I don't think they realized the entire podcast as a whole kind of was an advertisement for home education.
Well, I don't know if they realized it, but I got emails from people. We were going to put our first grader into first grade this fall, and we are not going to do that anymore. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. So
even the things they were saying to kind of almost contradict your points was still confirming your points, which I found very interesting. Sam, it's an uncomfortable conversation sometimes to go against the grain, to speak out, to say school is trash, essentially, these days, especially. Yeah. If you could give one piece of advice to those listening when it comes to this issue, especially homeschool parents or those considering it, to speak out on these issues or anything else that convicts them pretty strongly, what would be that one piece of advice to encourage them to speak out?
To encourage them to speak out? Well, so the reason that I speak out is because I feel like I discovered the cure for cancer. Home education can save this nation, but more importantly, it can save your child. And so if I can save your child, that's a win for me, and that's my goal. And unfortunately, I have to go through you to save your child. So I'm talking to you, and that's the uncomfortable part. But my goal is for the freedom of that child. And the best way to ensure the freedom of that child is to not send them to a system that seeks to enslave them. It's really that simple. And so I'll do any argument, I'll debate anybody, I'll just take it on. And so I guess if you're in it and you're starting to see the benefits of it, share that with other people. Just like if you find the greatest fitting pair of jeans, you're going to tell people, yeah, I found the greatest fitting pair of jeans at this store. You should go try them. They're not expensive and they fit really well. Like, I found the greatest thing since sliced bread, the relationship between the parent and the child. And if you don't pervert it by sending your child away to school, it will come back, tenfold. So why wouldn't I share that with people, even if it makes them uncomfortable?
Oh, amen. Sam, where can everybody find you? I know you've also written books. You're an author. How do people find you, what you do, your website, your social media handles? Because I know people are going to want to follow up and see what you're doing and how you're advocating in this realm.
Yeah, no, it would be great if you follow me on Twitter. It's at the Sam Sorbo. Instagram is Sam_Sorbo. All of that information is available on my website, which is simply samsorbo.com. All of my books are there, and I have a new product that I just have pieced together, and I'm still adding stuff to it. It's called the Homeschool Starter Gift Set. So it's for parents who are sort of brand new, just to get them started. It's a collection of books and then also sample curricula from my favorite curriculum providers, people that I know and trust. It's so vital that you choose good curricula to give your kids. I'm talking with a parent here in Florida, and she said, I've heard good things about the Florida K through 12 system. And I'm like, that's just public school online. That's like woke ideology. Like that's just the worst. And she's like, oh, I heard good things about it. Yeah, from who? Like, whatever you do, don't do public school online.
Right.
Because that's literally school at home, and that is destined to fail because it's not conducive to the preservation of the family. So it'll still break up the family even though the kid's at home.
Yeah. Well, let me know when you have the starter kit or gift, whatever you're calling it.
Just launched it.
It's out?
Mm-hmm. It just launched like 10 days ago, and it's available at samsorbo.com. And it's just an amalgamation of great resources, mainly for young families, but people who are doing teens, they can use it too. But it is tailored for the younger family just to get people started.
No, that's amazing. I'll definitely take a peek at it and help promote it, because I do have a lot of people ask me, how do I get started? What do I do? And we've done a podcast episode a little bit on kind of the very beginning stages and what you need to do. But I think any resources that I can...
If I don't, I'm sorry to interrupt,
you're
but
fine.
I will tell you. So I developed the Playbook for Home Learning, which is it's basically a workbook with 15 videos. And it's available separately. It's part of the Homeschool Starter gift set, but it's the 15 videos that goes through step by step a lot of what we talked about, but more in depth. And it's geared to recalibrate the way that you think about the education of your child, so that when you're done, you feel empowered to take it on. That's the hope of that's the goal of the Playbook for Home Learning. It's a curriculum, but it's for the parent to set them free from the shackles of the school system, so that they can think freely and educate their child in freedom, basically. I wish I were saying it better. I feel like there's a better way to say it, but I'm all about the emancipation from this slave system that we call schools, and so that's what this does. There's the workbook, and then there's video upon video, 15 of them. They're each like about half an hour, and it just goes through step by step. And what do you think about this? And then you write your notes, because it's important that the brain and the hand coordination, you take notes. There's an online version, so you can type your notes if you want, but really gets you thinking, okay, so if this is what my goal is, because your goal is not Harvard. That's like a misnomer. Mm-hmm. Certainly not today, right? So then you figure out what your goals are, and then you figure out how to go about your goals. Then you're free. Then you can just do it and enjoy it while you're at it.
Absolutely. So you guys check out what she has going. Follow her on social media. You won't be disappointed. I promise you. I find so much inspiration in what you're doing and appreciate all that you're doing for the home learning community. Sam, thank you so much for joining the podcast. It has been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks so much for having me.